I really like it. I like examining what happens in the second half of life because, once in the first half of, like the first coming of age story, the kids get together and they find each other, they decide who they are, they fall in love, and they go off into the sunset. Theoretically, they're going through the white picket fence and the kids and whatever. But then if that's the typical romance, then what happens then? What happens after the kids are raised? I am intrigued by the idea that after the children are raised, assuming you have kids, if you're normal and healthy, you have as many years left after that as it took to raise that family. That's a long time to just keep doing the same thing or to not examine your life and your choices. So anyway, in this case, we have an executive woman, a workaholic, whose marriage is falling apart. One of the things about my character, Karen, is that she's been working so hard and her marriage has been over for a long time. But anyway, her mother dies and she has to go back to her hometown. I know that's a very familiar trope, but she goes back to her hometown in North Dakota. It's a very sweet, small town. And while she's in North Dakota, she plays golf with an old high school crush. And as they come to the end of the round, she's in turmoil because she's really out of practice. I mean, she's not quite divorced yet, but her marriage has been over for a long time. Her husband has impregnated a young woman, and so, they're on the way out. But still, she has, kind of a bad feeling about going after this guy, even though she's been crazy about him for a long time. I mean, they were in love together in high school. But anyway, she's kind of out of touch with her sexuality. And she's feeling a longing that she hasn't felt in years. So they come to the end of the like they're on the 18th hole. And it says, this is now where it picks up. At the last green, Karen watched him line up his putt, the him being Curt. In a few moments, they would finish the round, return to their cars, and go their separate ways, a prospect that made her feel lonely and old. But she didn't have the guts to ask for his phone number. Technically, she was married, and besides, she was supposed to be grieving, not stalking a man. His ball dropped into the cup. Your turn, he said, brushing past her. Karen shook herself out of a hormonal fog, picked up her marker, and lined up her shot. When her putt went in, the round ended. As was the custom, the three of them shook hands, Curt's grasp lingering as he pulled her forward and kissed her on the cheek. They returned to their carts to the garage and walked slowly across the nearly deserted parking lot in the afternoon sun. Karen knew she had to make a move, but she hadn't asked a guy on a date since college. What was the protocol nowadays? It wasn't like she wanted to marry him. What if he acted surprised, or worse, not interested? She wanted to, what, talk to him? Have dinner? None of the above, she thought as she watched him lift his heavy golf bag into the truck. I want him naked. The thought made her smile, but then the logistics struck her. Only Steve and her doctor had seen her naked in the last 30 years. Okay, so now here she starts arguing with herself. God, if it's going to happen, it had better be dark. And then she thinks, you can't do this, you're married. And then she thinks, I'm separated. And anyway, that didn't stop Steve. Well, what if he says no? If I don't ask, it's like he already did. Curt straightened up, closed the door, and turned to her. Some of my friends are coming by for a barbecue tomorrow night, she lied. Why don't you join us? Curt leaned against the bed of the truck, studying her for a moment before answering. Thanks, but I have another commitment. Okay, maybe another time. She reached for the door of the car, sensing her future stretching out as empty as the North Dakota freeway, and cursed herself for taking a chance. Of course he would turn her down. He worked at a college, surrounded by sexy young women, while she was half a century old. Women her age didn't date. They owned cats and went to the movies with girlfriends. Hey. She felt his hand on her arm and the deep rumble of his voice in her ear. He was right next to her, their bodies touching. She could feel his heat through her blouse. She turned, wanting to touch the dark stubble of his beard and suck up his lips with her own. He smiled down at her. Did you happen to bring a dress? So she's visiting from California and she's living out of a suitcase for a little while, and they end up going to this fancy kind of a dance thing that he's a professor at a college and he's being celebrated for some award. So that's kind of a hot chapter, but I'm not going to read you that. You'll have to wait. Sorry.